Hello, and welcome to Come to Think of It. My name is Steve Nemerovski, and I'm your host. For today's episode, we're going to examine, and I hope you're going to allow me some sarcastic latitude here, a very hot topic: wildfire preparedness. When my family and I lived in Chicago, the running joke was that there are only two seasons: winter and road construction. And while I haven't yet heard a similar adaptation here, I've come to think that in Colorado we also have two seasons lately: winter and wildfire. It doesn't seem too long before winter ends that the warnings of wildfires start to circulate. Just last week we had 4 red flag warning days. In our household, my wife starts putting together her evacuation items early in the spring. Once the outdoor furniture gets moved into the garage, they're placed right next to the car. We then schedule the landscapers to assist with wildfire mitigation by removing as much accumulated fuel as possible. And we begin an annual review of what trees and shrubs can be removed. We also occasionally have the fire marshal send a member of his team to see what we can do to protect our home, better protect our home. And then we wait and pray that our community does not experience a wildfire. Many people say it's not if, but when. Not very comforting. However, at the same time, we are very blessed in our state and local area to have some of the top minds and strategists in the entire world keeping us safe. And they have an amazing track record. Let's keep our fingers crossed here. So for today's episode, we're coming to think about wildfire preparedness with one of those experts, Thomas Welle. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So I hope you don't mind, and I'm not trying to embarrass you here, but for some guests, I have no choice but just to read the whole resume. And in fact, if I read your whole resume, it would take a half hour, so I'm going to not read the whole resume, but that's the only way I can introduce you. So let's try that. Tom is the principal and consultant for Wildfire Preparedness Services, LLC. He provides advice, training, and support to communities, the insurance industry, and utilities on emergency preparedness issues from wildfire. He's a contract instructor for the National Fire Protection Association's Assessing Structural Ignition Potential from Wildfire 2-day course. He's the former manager of the Denver field office for the National Fire Protection Association's Wildfire Division. He's presented training, workshops, and webinars across the nation to a wide variety of audiences, including the United States Congress. Tom is a retired structural and wildfire fire captain with 30-plus years of experience with the wildland-urban interface. He has managed tactical aircraft for the U.S. Forest Service, worked as a ranger for the National Park Service, and taught fire science and high-angle rescue at the community college level. In addition to consulting, Tom is a certified wildfire mitigation specialist with Metro Fire Rescue in the Denver metro area. And that doesn't count the stuff I also took out, but obviously, you're very dedicated to your profession. You've been very good at it for a long time, and I congratulate you on that great success.
Oh, thank you.
I was intrigued in here where it says you spoke to Congress. What was your message to Congress?
Well, that always sounds really good. It ends up that you're talking to a bunch of 12-year-old staffers most of the time,
but that's who runs Congress.
But you did get a couple of them down if there was free food later. But it was the same thing. It's really talking about the fact that controlling wildfire is not helping us stop the wildfire disasters when it comes to the built environment. And we have to take a new approach to that, new funding approaches to that, and that's really what you go to Washington for. You try to give them something that they can throw money at, because that's what they're good at, but you got to give them a target. And so that's what I went there a couple times to do.
I hadn't thought about this till you just mentioned it, funding, and obviously funding is critical to fighting wildfires. Of the funding we need, how much does come at the national level? How much the state level? How much local?
Well,
is there a breakout?
It depends on how you look at it, because the funds for fire suppression are one set of dollars, and then funding that goes towards grant funding for mitigation and those kinds of things and programs that support that are another set of funds. But the big trail of money obviously comes from the federal government to the states and then down to the locals. And that's where some of the stuff for mitigation could get a little bit critical. It's really unknown right now whether or not that funding is going to continue like it had under the prior administrations.
the mitigation part of it.
Right. I think the suppression funding is still going to be there.
So you and I were talking before the show started, and I'm expecting you to give my audience some stern lessons today, because this is life and death. And we have to get those stern messages. But I wanted to start with some good news, because I think there's some good news out there. Starting which I've read almost 98% of the fires that get started are put out pretty quickly or put out without serious loss of property damage or life. Is that correct?
Well, essentially, yes. So 98% of the time we're very effective with fire suppression. Not to be a Debbie Downer here, but the reverse of that is, because we've been so effective at that we have not allowed fire to do what it naturally does in the ecosystem, which is to clean out our forests and thin them out naturally. So we've got essentially overgrown forests because we have suppressed so many fires. So now the only time we get ecologically significant fire is under extreme conditions instead of under all conditions like we used to. And so that has created forests that are unhealthy, overstocked, more susceptible to disease and bugs, and certainly to drought, which then makes fires worse.
And isn't it kind of a big change in approach? And I don't know if it's over the last 5 years or 10 years that we were letting the forest kind of overgrow, but now it seems like we're doing these burns and doing things to help protect the forest. I know here locally we had a very large burn in Aspen earlier in the season.
So prescribed fire is our answer to suppressing all these fires for 120 years, right? And so just to give you an example, down on the Front Range where I live, ponderosa pine forest, normally that should be about 40 trees per acre. We're at 400 trees per acre. So
wait. Should be 40.
We're at 400.
That's a lot of
So
trees.
that's that overstocking that I'm talking about. And what that does to us is then when we do get ignitions, we get extreme fire very rapidly. And so that is what has led to a lot of these wildland urban disasters where we're losing 100 homes or more. It's kind of how that's classified.
Well, that's scary. I didn't realize that kind of a ratio had changed so significantly. That explains some things right there. Well, let's go to good news point number 2, though. We got to get the new news out. We have some amazing coordination in the state level, right? And at the local level, we've got the collaborative here. And we've got, I think, an amazing group of professionals and volunteers that are ready to take on these tough tasks. And I don't know if that's a recent development, but I think it's another good news point we've got to talk about.
It's been years in the making, actually. And Colorado, when I first started in this, was not a big fire state. But once we had the Hayman fire in 2001, 2002, whichever that was, we began a progressive record-setting pace in this state to where now we are the second state with the most homes exposed to wildfire in the United States, behind California. And so
you're turning my good news into bad news.
Well,
here.
That's what has brought these collaboratives and folks together, and people professionalizing themselves to learn how to deal with the problem and organize our communities, our governmental efforts. The fact that Colorado has built up a lot since the 1990s, and so we have put a lot more values at risk into that wildland area, and so it just stands to reason that we're going to have higher losses when we do have structure or wildfires that approach structures. So it's now then that thing that people have realized that, and we have so many collaboratives. Fire Adapted Colorado is a big nonprofit organization that is doing tremendous work in the state. And a lot of the collaboratives, like the Roaring Fork Collaborative, and some of those are part and parcel to that, and receiving funding for that, grant funding to help. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff going on there.
Okay, I like to stick with the good stuff. And we were also talking beforehand, science, I think, has taken us a long way recently in understanding a lot about not just fire management, but avoiding fires. And, we were talking on the way here, for instance, with AI. Spotting fires and getting them quickly is very important. And AI, you said, has helped in that regard.
There's a lot of science going on right now around fire modeling to help us figure out pathways that fire is going to enter into a community, what the outlook of ember cast over a community is going to look like, given a certain amount of winds and a certain type of fire. The detection that you had talked about, there's AI detection work that is going on all over the United States. The utility companies, by the way, have been very big partners in that, in trying to fund these cameras that are out detecting smoke, often before we would be able to see it with the naked eye. And been very successful then that we can get air assets on that rather quickly and keep it from growing. There again, we're still back into that. We're suppressing everything, right? But we're stuck in that. I think the only other way that we can put fire back into the landscape is through prescribed fire, like you were talking about earlier.
And how's the science improved in that area, in this prescribed fires?
Oh, I think, I don't know that we've had a lot of science improvements there, other than some of the ways that we can ignite, like we can use drones to now do ignition rather than helicopters or just drip torches on the ground, so it's a little more efficient. But in terms of, I think the science of the foresters knowing where we need to do these burns, how hot they need to be, getting them in the right prescription of wind and temperature so that they do what we need them to do, but we can still keep them controlled. And it's a delicate dance, but they're very good at it. The better we get our homes and communities ignition resistant and ready for fire, I think the more accepting folks will be of having prescribed fire as a part of their life. And of course, we still need to deal with smoke, and that's always a difficult issue with prescribed fire.
And I know I read your bio, you dealt with some of the aircraft. I think I'd read that pilots can now fly at night or under more difficult circumstances to drop the water and drop the red stuff? I'm just going to call it the red stuff.
It's fire retardant or slurry, and it's made to drop on the fire to try and just control its movement. Doesn't put fire out. We're really just trying to either redirect it or slow it down. It's actually a nitrate, so it's like a fertilizer, so it helps with regrowth after the fire. But we do have some limitations with aircraft. There have been movements to try and get aircraft to be able to fly at night when the fire tends to lay down a bit more.
Right.
It's more dangerous. They're using night vision goggles and that sort of thing. There's been a lot of aircraft lost during that, so it's up and down whether we're really going to be able to keep doing that or not. However, one of the biggest limitations with aircraft is wind, and with our really severe extreme wildfires, we often get really high wind,
right,
and we can't launch any aircraft.
Interesting. Okay, good news. I want to have good news. Now we got to get to the nuts and bolts here, and it's not all good news. One thing that I don't get at all is we were having these red flag warnings locally, and I'm driving up and down the road, and they continuously say, don't have chains. And then I'm hearing the other day that we have a couple fires that have started, maybe one outside a Rifle and somewhere else locally, and they were because of chains. First of all, how do we stop that? And the Glenwood Canyon fire, I think, was some chains. How do we stop that? And I just be totally stupid here. Why do people need chains in June?
So it's not tire chains, it's tow chains.
Okay.
These are chains that are the safety chain on a trailer that you're towing, like an RV trailer, horse trailer, utility trailer, and if they leave it hanging too long and it scrapes on the road as they're going down, it causes sparks. So that's the chains that they're talking about, and it's on these trailers and stuff. So the solution to that is just to make sure that the chain is not dragging too far onto the ground. The safety
Again,
chain.
it's just stunning to me, though, that anybody who knows anything would have their chain hanging too low to hit the ground.
It's just carelessness, or it gets loose. I mean, I've seen where RVs have set 5, 6, 7 fires along a section of highway, totally unbeknownst to themselves, that they are setting these fires as they drive along.
Well, this is way off on the side here, but it seems to me that we often know who started a fire. In the case of a chain, we may know this particular RV started the fire. Why don't we have some very draconian laws that basically say your chain starts a fire, 20 years in jail? I mean,
Yeah,
I know it's not how I want to solve problems in society, but if we know the cause and effect, is there a way to just get there?
there can be, in certain counties, I think there may be probably reimbursement for costs and stuff. You know, the law goes a long ways if there's no intent, right? The person didn't intend to cause the fire. It's an accident. And so, you know, the law gives you a break that way too. But oftentimes there can be fines for that, yes.
So I'm driving down the road, I see an RV, now I know I have to look for the tow chain. Should I call the highway patrol and say I see an RV?
Absolutely.
With a low chain and
Yeah,
think there's a
and
fire
see if they can get them
hazard here?
stopped and get that fixed, yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. I'm going to stop here if you don't mind, because I wanted to get some really hardcore stuff, but I also want to get a quick message for the food pantry. So let's take a quick break.
Very good.
Food Bank of the Rockies is the largest hunger relief organization in the Rocky Mountain region. Currently, they are responding to the highest levels of hunger they've seen in 10 years. Through their network of hunger relief partners, including those here in Aspen, and food distribution events, the food bank is committed to providing nutritious and familiar foods to individuals across the Western Slope. Here's an example of their great work.
When I saw the long line of cars, I thought there's such a need in the valley. What it feels like when you don't have food is that you've let your family down. I'm Sherry Lee, I'm 62 years old, and I live in Grand Junction, Colorado. We were homeless, and they fed us. We're better off than we've ever been, thanks to the Food Bank of the Rockies.
We're back with Tom Welle talking about wildfire preparedness, and we're going to start drilling down and talking about some of the things you can be doing as a homeowner and as a member of your community. So Tom, of course, in your bio, you consult to, as said, communities, insurance companies, individual property owners. I'm going to let the insurance companies for now worry about themselves and talk about the two things that are most important, I think, particularly to an Aspen or a Snowmass Village to the valley here. But let's start at the community level. When you get called in by a community, where do you start and where do you end, and what are some of your accomplishments in helping communities solve community level problems?
So it always starts with the individual home, because that's where we win or lose in the fight with fire. Wildfire is really subsequent to the disaster. It initiates the thing. But once we get it into the built environment carries the fire all by itself. The wildfire is gone. It's somewhere else. And now we're burning internally in the community. And that's structures and landscaping that are carrying the fire. So when I work with communities, I want to start with that very basic building block, which is the home ignition zone, which is the structure, and out to about 100 feet. If we don't have 100 feet, we go about 30, because really the house and out to 30 feet are the most important parts on the planet that are going to determine that home's survivability. And if we all did what we needed to do on the home and within 30 feet, we would be able to seriously reduce the amount of homes that ignite from wildfire and make it a solvable problem. Let me just give you an example. When we get multiple simultaneous ignitions of structures, the fire departments become inefficient. And I say that because we have more structures exposed to fire than we can cover. So when you dial 911, if you cut your hand or grandpa's having a heart attack or something, you expect that engine to be at your house in a few minutes. That's our expectation. When we have a significant wildfire, we may have multiple homes that are on fire or in the process of burning, and only so many firefighters to go around. In 2021, I think, the National Fire Protection Association did a study. 97% of the respondents to the survey of fire departments across the United States said the maximum number of structures that they can handle on fire at one time is between 2 and 7. In the Waldo Canyon fire that we had in 2012 in Colorado Springs, we had 30 structure ignitions per hour. So you can understand that the pace, once it gets inside the community and races through the community because of the close proximity of one structure to the other, it's nearly impossible for the fire department to be effective. So the good news is we can fix that as the homeowner taking on our responsibility for our home ignition zone and working with our neighbors collaboratively, because our home ignition zones are going to overlap in many cases, so that we can stop that ignition process, because if a home doesn't ignite, it doesn't burn. This is a structural ignition problem, not a wildfire problem.
So when we were talking earlier again, you were talking about the roof being the most critical aspect to this. Why I got lucky, and I don't want to jinx myself here, and ended up with a metal roof 20 years ago, I don't know. But we don't have a lot of metal roofs in the area here. We have a lot of roofs that can burn. Is there anything relatively simple that could be done, or you just tell people, get that metal roof or get the roof that can't burn and go there?
So almost any type of roofing other than wood shake shingles is fine. So you don't have to have metal, you don't have to have tile, expensive cement tiles, you don't have to have that. You can have composition asphalt shingle roof. Now, the deal here, like in Aspen, is the aesthetic, right? I mean, the historic look to a lot of the homes have that shake shingle roof on them. But embers, flying firebrands, are the single most likely ignition source for your home. They come down like a blizzard of snow, only they're little burning pieces of trees or other structures. And 90% of the ignitions we get from structures happen from embers. And so your roof is the largest surface area to be able to take on embers. And if that is a very vulnerable wood roof that can ignite in little to no time at all, nothing else you do around your house is going to matter. So changing out that roof is vital for you and your neighbors, because those shake shingles will fly. They will part company under high winds. They're on fire. So you've got little burning propellers going through the neighborhood, landing on somebody else's deck or roof or whatever. So they're a hazard throughout the town. So the answer is to look for, if you really have to have that aesthetic, that look, to look for some composite materials that mimic those shake shingles, and you solve that problem.
Okay. And then you have to keep your gutters clean, because even if your roof might be okay, if your gutters catch on fire, you have a problem there too.
So let's take your metal roof. The roof itself, the roofing material, is ignition resistant. Where it's vulnerable is at the drip edge, because underneath that metal roof is wood. And where your gutter lines up with your roof line, you have a gap there. And if you've got material burning in your gutters, which will ignite in about 9 seconds from embers, if it's dry, you get flame at about 3 or 4 inches or more that will then get underneath your metal roof into the wood underlayment, and now your roof's on fire. So that's where the vulnerability of the roof is.
Again, scary stuff.
But solvable stuff, that's the thing.
Solvable.
We can manage that if we just do.
So you just mentioned a rule that I've heard, and I assume it's pretty hard and fast here. That the first 5 feet are the most critical. Then we go out to like a 30-foot threshold, and then maybe a 100-foot threshold. What's the science behind those thresholds, and what is your messaging within the 5 feet? Let's start there.
So a scientist by the name of Jack Cohen was 40 years with the U.S. Forest Service, and he is the principal investigator that determined all of this home ignition zone science. He's been a mentor of mine and a good friend, and he did some studies in the late 1990s in the the Northwest Territories in Canada, where they lit off a 500 by 500 foot section, several of them, of trees, and created a crown fire. That's the big fire you see in the tops of the trees on the news, because we wanted to determine how close does that need to be for that radiant heat to ignite a wood wall.
So at that point, it's the radiant heat, not the embers or not even the fire
at that
itself.
point,
it's just the temperature
right
of the fire around it.
Because at that point, we didn't know it was the embers yet. We were still trying to figure out, how are these homes burning down? And we made an estimate that said 100 feet, I bet we can ignite a wood wall from that big old crown fire. Well, come to find out, we had to be inside of 30 feet because that radiant heat loses a lot of energy over a very short distance. That's what led us down the road to go, well, if it has to be that close, how come we're burning homes down well away from that distance? Then we started figuring out low-intensity surface fire caused by spotting, spot fires from the embers, or the embers landing directly on the structures themselves. But that was the beginning of the science that said, we know that something, if this were the house, if that's the structure, it's very local what's going on around that determines whether it ignites or not. That became the home ignition zone. So the structure and out to 5 feet, critical. Okay. Out to 30 feet, less critical but really important. Out to 100 feet, the same.
What's the 100, between the 30 and the 100, what are we accomplishing
So
there?
mainly if you've got like a larger acreage or a larger lot, we're really managing vegetation there, right?
Okay.
We don't want crown fire coming in within 100 feet. We don't want any intense burning going on that can carry to the structure. So if we have trees, fine. We just want to make them not all a big forest. We want them more clumped and a little separation between the crowns. We don't want laddering, which is like brush or small trees up into larger trees. We want trees limbed up 6 to 8 feet off the ground, so if fire comes in on the surface, it doesn't get up into the tops of the trees.
Yeah, and I've heard about the laddering, and I mentioned in my intro, we've done a lot of this stuff at my house to keep it this straight line from going up right up to your house, right across the top of the trees. Very critical. And that's something I think everybody around here could be doing. We all have beautiful trees, we all have beautiful landscaping, but staggering stuff, and you just said, maybe have a clump here and a clump here, those are all things we could be doing, right?
Exactly.
I have a friend who insists that hydration of trees makes a difference. Is that true? If we keep our trees significantly hydrated, will that keep them from burning, or are they just going to burn anyway if there's enough intensity?
That's a complicated question.
I need a 10-second answer.
So the fact of the matter is that fuel moisture does matter, right? The lower the fuel moisture, the easily ignitable the fuel is going to be, right? However, any conifers are going to be a little bit more burnable than your deciduous trees. So aspens, cottonwoods, and that always carry a lot more moisture in them anyway. So they're a lot more difficult to get to burn anyway.
Okay, so aspens, cottonwoods, what's the other one?
Any kind of deciduous tree that you have that drops its leaves in the fall. Hardwoods, they just tend to not burn as well, but any tree can burn if we get them dry enough.
Okay, and I'm not going to ask you to give me the answer today, but hopefully you'll agree with me. I've done a lot of reading. If you work with your landscaper, there's actually some plants that burn faster and other plants that burn slower, and if you replace it with slower burning plants, you're again mitigating some risk.
Right, and Colorado State Forest Service has a low ignitability, low flammability plant guide that you can get off their website, Colorado State Forest Service website, that can help you, especially if you're going to be having plants that are closer to the structure. We still don't recommend anything within 5 feet.
We've been a great guest. You've given us a lot of information here. Hope our listeners will take in everything you said and then go from there to their collaboratives and just do everything they can to help protect their homes. How can people find you if they want to ask you some questions?
So the easiest way to get me is just through my email, which is twelle.wps.
And Welle is W-E-L-L-E, so T-W-E-L-L-E.
.wps
WPS.
at gmail.com. And I just want to leave you with one thing. The responsibility for protecting your home rests with you, the homeowner. We can't do it without you. So you've got to be part of the solution for us to turn the corner on stopping wildland urban fire disasters.
Tom, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So in closing, I'm going to just have a little bit of humor here, not sarcasm. They always say, you know, how fast do you have to run to get away from a bear? And of course, the answer is faster than the person you're with. A lesson I've learned, and I think it's true, and I think it has to be true, as you heard Tom say today, the fireman can maybe put out 7 homes, and that's it. You want the fireman to decide that your home is one of those 7. You want the fireman to look at your situation and decide, we can save that house. So that's my recommendation to everybody. Learn these lessons well, get with your local fire marshals, and make your house the house that's going to be saved. Join us again next time on Come to Think of It.